I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded today, the Wiradjuri people, my people. I'd like to take this time to acknowledge our elders, past, those that watch over, guide and protect us, present, those that walk beside us, nurture and teach us the way, and future, the young ones that will succeed us into the future. I would like to acknowledge our continued connection to the lands, the waterways, and the skies, our animals, plants, and fauna. I would like to acknowledge our history. In story, song, and dance, we continue to share these stories. I would like to acknowledge each and every one of you. And I'd like to acknowledge the lands on which you tune into today, where you sit, where you live, where you work, and where you play, and how important it is for us to acknowledge where we are at this very moment. Mandangu, thank you.
Many Australians struggle with building financial security, and we know that for women and diverse folk there can be additional challenges, which is why it's so important that financial education and services take into account different lived experiences and needs to really meet people where they are at. Today, our guest is Grace Mugabe, an award-winning financial literacy educator, money coach and accountant with a dash of personality and sass. Grace's organisation, Financially Empowered, specialises in dismantling the financial knowledge gap, particularly impacting marginalised women, and through interactive transformative workshops, programs and tools, she equips women in business to build financial confidence, to boost their earning potential and secure their future. In our conversation today, Grace and I talk about her work in supporting culturally and linguistically diverse women in business, as well as her award-winning Migrant Money Matters program, and why it's important to consider the diverse experiences of people when we talk about financial security and equality. Hi, Grace. Thanks for joining us on It's Not About the Money. I am very much looking forward to hearing your talk about Financially Empowered and the work that you do. Can we start, please, by sharing the lands that you live and work on?
So I'm on Noongar Buja. So Buja means land or country in...
And can you please tell us a little bit about your work and what you do?
All right. So by profession, I'm an accountant. I like to refer to myself as an accountant with personality and sass. I challenge the convention image of number crunchers, and I like to think that I bring a refreshing perspective to the financial world. Although I must admit that I do like spreadsheets. I'm also a board director, so AICD qualified, and so I have sat and sit on a number of boards and committees. And I also use that skill to co-facilitate a program called Emerging Leaders in Governance, which empowers young people, so under 40, with governance skills so they can also sit on boards and committees. And that ensures that we have an inclusive and diverse perspectives on boards. And lastly, I'm a business founder. So in 2015, I left my corporate role at Rio Tinto to start Financially Empowered. And I guess I got to a point where I couldn't ignore the financial information gap faced by women, particularly marginalized women, and more importantly for me, child and migrant women. And Financially Empowered's mission is empowerment through financial literacy and capability, so women can make more informed financial decisions and achieve economic independence.
Is this where you expected to be when you were younger?
So partly with boards, from my teens, I always wanted to be a board director. So both my parents served on boards and were chairs of some of the boards that they were on. So I'd always ask questions when they'd come back, like, oh, we were at a board meeting. And I found it super fascinating. So, but then I thought that I had to be old at that time over 40 to sit on a board, because that's all. I never saw the fact that women were a minority on boards because that wasn't what I saw. So on the boards that my mom served, there usually was, equal representation. From business perspective, I always wanted to start a business. I didn't know exactly what the business would entail. So as a teenager, I participated in a program called Junior Achievement. And it's a group of students who start their own business and you sell a product. So at school, we would sell donuts. And then at the end of the term, you dissolve the business and then you share the dividends. And I thought that was a really cool process. And yeah, really wanted to be a part of that. And then with being an accountant, I hated accounting. And I never saw myself doing accounting. I had to do it in high school. And then for the equivalent of TE, I actually did it because I was good with numbers and I figured maybe one day it would help me with my business. And so when I came to Australia for university, I wasn't planning on studying accounting. I was going to do a business degree. And then it was through the foundation units in the first year that I was like, actually, I do find accounting interesting. And so that's how I landed to be an accountant.
I think accountancy is such a great foundation for so many different things. I know so many people like myself who've studied accounting that have never gone on to work in the profession, but the knowledge and the skills that you gain through that qualification and the problem solving and the way of approaching things in a really logical, rational way, I think hold you in good stead, especially when it comes to making financial decisions, right?
Yeah, so accounting is quite helpful in day-to-day practice because the thing is we all spend money. And so we do need to understand where it's going, where it's coming from, how to make it all balance as well. So it's a useful skill to have.
I think there is sometimes the misconception with accounting that it's all about numbers, much like managing money is all about numbers, but there is so much more to it.
Yeah, there is. So, like you said, problem solving as well, being strategic and thinking about the future as well, because that's quite important. A lot of the times we are quite focused on the now, but that helps to sort of broaden your perspective.
So, in sharing the stories of your childhood and observing your parents going out to boards and then having those opportunities to participate in activities, it really highlights that importance of modelling. You can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And often those experiences that we are exposed to as children have a big impact in shaping our understanding of the world, the opportunities that are out there, and what we can potentially do. I'm curious what your inspiration was to start Financially Empowered.
So I guess from a young age, I used to volunteer with girls. And so as I got older, I would volunteer with, I guess, women or girls my age. And then I started to see, as I got older, I started to see women who relied on their husbands for their livelihood. And then in turn, some of them staying in relationships that they were unhappy in due to financial constraints. And at the time, I just didn't understand how that could happen because my mom was quite financially independent. And so once I did start to understand, I kind of thought, well, maybe, using my privilege, I can use that to make a difference. And so then in coming to Australia, I started to see more the fact that, colored women and migrant women were struggling to get opportunities. And so I wanted to be able to, open doors for them as well.
And so under the umbrella of Financially Empowered, you run the Migrant Money Matters program. Can you share with us what that's actually about?
So it's about breaking down barriers to access financial education and I guess culturally sensitive financial education. So the program provides childcare, free childcare. We provide interpreters if required. The catering is always by a migrant business. And we've got accessibility to location. If they need assistance in getting there, we do provide smart riders or travel cards. And then there's a holistic approach to the program. So I will have a refuge come and talk about financial abuse. I will have someone come and talk about mental health and the impacts of money and mental health. I have a female financial advisor who talks about superannuation. We've got a tax accountant that talks about tax. And then we also share information about things like no interest loans, which a lot of people aren't aware of. And this stemmed from running a workshop once where I had a participant say to me that she didn't feel safe going home. And so she actually left my workshop and went straight to a refuge. And so this is why then I included this holistic approach to my workshop.
And we know that as men and women experience financial security differently, and likewise financial inequality is not experienced by all women equally. Why is it so important that we bring that lens of intersectionality when we are working in the financial education space, when we're talking about finances? And for example, creating a program that is especially designed for the experiences of culturally and linguistically diverse women and migrants.
So as a financial educator, it is really important to have an understanding of the various social identities that interact to shape a person's experiences, because that also informs the way that we experience or relate to money, wealth, or even the ability to access financial resources. So as a financial educator, it informs every aspect of my approach. So understanding the multiple identities that a person can have. So as an example, a Black woman may face a wider pay gap than her female counterpart, but then she will also have less access to generational wealth, which then impacts her financial security. We also then have the importance of building inclusive financial experiences. So it's important to have culturally safe and appropriate environments, because we want all our participants to feel comfortable in engaging financial concepts that a lot of people are quite fearful of and find intimidating. And then lastly, it's tailoring our programs to the needs of our participants. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So migrants have specific needs in terms of understanding financials within their new environment. So, for example, in Australia, our financial year end is the 30th of June, but in the UK, it's the 5th of April, and in South Africa, it's the 31st of March. But some people also come from countries where you don't have to lodge a tax return, and then you come to Australia and you do, or they don't have superannuation. And there are cultures where it is expected that children will take care of their parents in old age. So the other thing that I want to do is to change the perception that people have of migrants. So they're often it's often assumed that they're an economic burden or they lack communication skills. However, if it is a white migrant, they're referred to as an expat, and that they are here because they want to be, they are going to be able to take care of themselves and contribute to the economy.
And in fact, migrants add so much to the Australian economy and our society as well, don't they?
They do. Definitely that different perspective from their experiences. Again, not everyone has come here unwillingly. There are a lot of very educated migrants, and so they again can share that with their counterparts. They come and they work, and so they're contributing to Australia's growing economy.
Just thinking about in terms of our financial system, and our banking system is quite complex, but quite highly regulated as well. Superannuation you mentioned, which many people who are born in Australia struggle to understand and engage with. Do you think the system needs to engage with the CALD community better?
Oh, most definitely. Just being culturally aware as a start is really important. I'll give you an example. So I recommended a client, a financial advisor to a client of mine. And after the meeting, the financial advisor says, do you know that they send $1,000 every month to their home country? And if they were to take that money and invest it, they would be making a lot more money. And just that comment alone just showed the lack of cultural awareness. So for that person, it is not a choice. It is the difference between life or death for their family overseas. It's an obligation. And so when we don't recognize that and just have that blanket approach to, for example, financial advisory, we're just completely missing the mark.
There is such a failure of the system, financial advice, financial services generally, to understand the wide diversity of cultural approaches to managing money. There is, I think, in the Australian context, often a focus on that individualism versus the collectivism of wealth. How can we better, I suppose, include those different perspectives to genuinely reflect the diversity of cultural beliefs and values around money, rather than the dominant approach of, the individual and looking after oneself as being the priority?
So I think it starts with, again, that cultural awareness, but also when you are with your clients, asking questions, because again, cultures differ. You could have two people from the same country, but they have different cultures, but they also have different experiences when it comes to money. So being able to just ask what their experiences are and how they relate to money, having an approach where advice does consider the collective approach, because in some Asian countries, for example, they have a multi-generational approach to money. So again, having everyone in the room to be able to have that conversation rather than one person, and also speaking to everyone, getting all their input, because again, we often hear that you have male and female couple go and see financial advisor, and they'll often focus on the man. So again, taking everyone's input into consideration.
I've even seen that in talking to women, particularly from First Nations communities. There's often even a misunderstanding of the approach to money management in those communities, and it does vary from community to community. But the idea of collective wealth is often frowned on and judged. I think the way that the dominant culture is so embedded in our systems and our products, and it really leads to that marginalisation, doesn't it? And exclusion. If we're genuine about building a financial system that is inclusive of the people who live in Australia, we need to really revisit those values and beliefs at the very core, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I think, again, it's also the fact that that's what they're exposed to. And so then because of that, they think that they're right. Not being, not even having a network where there's diversity also then clouds your view on things, which can be quite frustrating. But yeah, that being willing to learn is also just as important.
That's why we need diversity in decision making in financial services and in the government more generally, isn't it? Because we are never going to get that change until the decision making reflects the community that it represents, and at the moment it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of the particular challenges faced by migrant and called women when it comes to building financial capability and well-being in Australia?
So there are a lot of systematic barriers. We've got the gender pay gap, but then limited access to affordable childcare, and there's discrimination in the workplace. And so that just makes it even harder for the CALD community to be able to earn, save, or invest effectively. In some cases, and not all cases, there can be a language barrier. So financial information and advice does not cater to this. So financial information can be quite complex. It uses a lot of jargon. So if English isn't your native language, then sometimes it can be quite difficult to understand. But then it's also not just English as a challenge, but the colloquialisms that are used in everyday language. So if you're a migrant, you may not understand certain terms and slang that's used within Australia. And then limited access to financial education. So again, there are many underrepresented women from communities that have limited access to financial literacy resources. And then in turn, that can make them vulnerable to predatory practices as well. A lot of CALD women and migrants often will have to work part-time or casually to be able to sustain themselves. But then this money may not be enough to actually cover all their living expenses. And so then they tend to fall for things like payday loans, getting themselves into a lot of debt as well. So that makes it quite challenging as well. But the other thing is migration challenges. So as I mentioned before, there are a lot of us who've been privileged to move to Australia willingly, but there are a lot of people who have had to move here out of circumstances. And so for them, they experience a lot of trauma and displacement. So this has long-lasting effect on their financial well-being. You know, resettlement comes with its own challenges. Being able to try and find employment is hard, but it's also challenging when you, a degree in physics, and all of a sudden it's not recognized in Australia. And so now you're having to look for a basic entry job just to be able to make ends meet. This just, again, continues that cycle of making it difficult for migrants in the CALD community.
Grace, in your opinion, do you think there is enough research and measurement regarding the financial inequality that is experienced by migrant and CALD women?
Absolutely not. I guess historically, diversity has been gender focused. And so as a result, a lot of the research that's done, surveys that are out there only address gender. So as a result, we end up missing out on information around, our CALD community, migrants as well. I mean, even our own census doesn't ask about ethnicity or, what country you've come from. So, there's a lot of change that needs to happen in that space.
And we know, for example, that the gender pay gap figures don't drill down into the experience of women with disabilities, women from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, our First Nation women. How do we manage what we don't measure?
You can't. And so this is why then, again, in terms of things like policies, we just end up not considering the needs of the community because we don't have the data to back it up. And the other thing that happens is if you're not exposed to a particular type of person, for example, you're not going to have any need to consider what their needs are. And so if you're not seeing it reported on and having to sort of understand that, oh, this is actually an issue in our community, then again, this is another reason why there ends up being the discrimination and certain people in our community being dismissed.
In your experience, how important is advocacy, and what are the characteristics of the programs and policies that do make a difference?
Well, advocacy is really important because it raises awareness in terms of what is actually going on. Again, as I was mentioning, like if you're not exposed to a particular thing, then you have no reason to actually think about it. So there's that. There's also being able to create opportunities using the privilege that you have. So, for example, one of the things that I like to do is if I'm invited to speak somewhere, I will often ask for a spare ticket and invite someone who may not have had the opportunity to be within that network. And so it is quite easy for, other people to be able to do that and open doors for, for other people.
Do you have any tips for people who perhaps do experience privilege, whether that's affluence, whether that's white privilege, whether that's the privilege of education, to really listen to amplify the voices of diverse people and to learn in this space?
So I think that's the first thing is to actually educate yourself in terms of Australia's multiculturalism. There's so many different cultures. Look at your network. What does that look like? Does it represent the Australian community? If not, then you need to be able to, you need to make an effort to actually expose yourself to other people. It also helps to broaden your thinking as an individual. You can also support minority owned businesses as well. That's, again, that's another way of being able to empower them. And again, that mentorship and allyship is really important. That enables people to get through the door, because there's so many cowled women and migrant women that don't even know where the door is. And so we have, with that privilege, you're able then to create those opportunities.
There was something that somebody said to me once. In our local community, we have fabulous diversity, but he pointed out that having diversity in and of itself doesn't result in inclusion. That it's one thing to have a seat at the table, it's a whole other thing to actually be actively engaged in the conversation and be listened to and be taken seriously and all of those things. In your experience of working with boards, why is it so important that there is that diverse representation that includes called people? But also, how do we ensure that it is focused on inclusion and not simply just the representation?
So, inclusion is really important to be able to hear different perspectives. So, a migrant woman or a cowled woman has different lived experiences. But also, if they come from a different country, they may have seen things that work from their perspective that they could introduce onto a board here that's also going to help with that organization, create innovation within that organization as well. It improves problem solving, again, because you have different points of views. You're able to also challenge different assumptions. It also helps to inspire the next generation, because again, you can't be what you can't see. So, whilst being at that table, ask for people's input, open that, create the safe space for people to want to share their experiences and to be able to contribute. Making things also accessible. Again, if you need to, explain different terminologies, within your board, don't use acronyms. Make it easy for people to want to engage as well.
So how do we as individuals, as community leaders, as business leaders, how do we foster inclusivity in our community and in the workplace?
So raising awareness, speaking up when you see something's not right, educating yourself around, diversity and inclusion. Because, again, diversity is different to inclusion. So there's an example that I heard once is diversity is around inviting me to a party, and inclusivity is inviting me to dance. So it's really vital that we have that inclusivity side of things. Again, supporting minority businesses, looking for opportunities in which you can create opportunities for people that are different. The places that you network, as well, go to different events that you normally wouldn't. You get to meet different people in that way. And where possible, try and generate different opportunities for capacity building, that facilitating the ability to learn and create different pathways for the CALD community.
What advice would you have for any called women who are listening to this podcast?
So I think the first thing is financial empowerment is possible, and it's a journey. So it's a lifelong learning process. So be patient and also be persistent. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no shame in not knowing something. Seek guidance where possible. I also encourage CALD women and migrants to actually talk amongst themselves. You get to learn a lot through other people's experiences, but also learning about each other's cultures and way of doing things as well. Also remembering that you're not alone. There are many other CALD women who are experiencing similar challenges. Now, it doesn't make that right, but sometimes it can also just help you in, moving along with the challenges that you have. Other things that you could do are explore government benefits. You may be eligible to things like, tax benefits or certain concessions. And this is particularly for migrants because they may come from countries where, you don't get government opportunities or their incentives. And so just being aware of what's out there for you. And for a lot of the CALD community, they also send money to their families overseas for their living expenses. So being mindful of exploring low cost money transfers, but being, again, educating yourself about things like scams as well. So then you're actually using the correct sort of platforms, well-known platforms. And lastly, celebrate your achievements. Building financial security is going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So acknowledge the progress that you make along the way, no matter how small it actually is. I think that, as much as we talk about the challenges that women, CALD women, are facing, there have also been a lot of positive things that have happened, different initiatives that are currently taking place. So we can see that with a lot of grants at the moment, they are for capacity building. Some of them are specific to migrant women, some specific to economic empowerment. There's a growing number of CALD women in this space and tackling finance from different perspectives as well. And so that also is going to help with the CALD community and migrants being able to have people that they can relate to.
And I think that final comment, it's so easy to look at things from a deficit perspective. We do the same thing when we're talking about metro and country areas, and there's so much strength, isn't there? And I think that whole strengths-based approach, it's like the gender inequality. There are certain things that men need to lead on because they dominate the parliament and they dominate the financial services. So we need them to get on board. But actually, women are really great at solving our own problems. Women have amazing strengths and capacity. Women from diverse backgrounds, whether we're talking about, women with disabilities, called women, migrant women, First Nations women, they've all got the capacity. If we can remove these systems that constrain and disadvantage us.
Yeah, exactly. You'll find that CALD women, migrant women, are probably the hardest working women because of the challenges that they've come across, the experiences that they've had. They're creating a life for themselves, not only here in Australia, but also for the families that they've left overseas. So their drive, the things that drive them are completely different. but what lacks is not being able to have opportunities, and like again those systematic barriers. Yeah.
And on that note, if you were Prime Minister for a day then, what would be your number one objective with regards to gender equality and building women's financial security?
I would get to mandate action that is going to break down barriers. So, there are a whole host of barriers that we have, things like childcare, and that impacts all women, or I guess any parent. There's also offering cheap or accessible ways to convert your degree from one country to Australia, because that has a long-term economic benefit in Australia. And one thing that I think would be really cool for migrants is when you receive your visa, is you get this little pack that gives you all the information that you need to know about the financial system. And that could be in your native language. But it explains just the little things like what's a tax file number, what's superannuation, the fact that we lodge tax returns in Australia. It doesn't have to be anything overwhelming, but just the basics, because then we are giving them a leg up in terms of when they come here, they have some sort of an idea of what to expect, and then they can get on with actually, their own financial empowerment and financial wellness.
And what are 3 simple things that people listening to this chat today can do to make a difference in their financial position?
So access free financial resources, things like podcasts, books from, your library. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of books and resources from CALD and migrant backgrounds, but we're getting there. There are a lot of women, again, that are out there in this space. So, being able to follow them. I guess removing that stigma around talking about money, I think, is really important, and well as connecting with other CALD women, but also understanding your spending habits. So just reviewing that and seeing, where is my money actually going? I've had numerous instances where clients will go and look at their subscriptions and actually realize that you're paying $5 a month for something that you don't even need to use. Now, while that might seem like it's just $5, it's $60 that you could save and invest. So it's, just those little actions. And again, reviewing those subscriptions and going, well, do I need it? Or, do I need the premium version? Can I get, the basic version as well? So it's not really about also eliminating things from your life, but just looking at those little things that you can change, because it's not always easy enough to, start a income generating hobby. Ideally, it would be looking for ways that you can make income, but sometimes that's just really hard.
Are there any specific go-to resources that you would recommend to women wanting to know more?
So, Money Smart website, which I think a lot of people in the financial space recommend. I think one thing that I like, in addition to the wealth of information, is that they also have resources in 15 different languages, which is great. The ATO website also has translated, tax time resources that people can also access. They also do have a podcast in different languages. The National Debt Helpline is always great for financial, if you're going through financial hardship, but also contacting your utility provider's hardship department as well. And then also there are just a whole bunch of books that are out there. She's on the Money, Girls That Invest, Barefoot Investor. An endless list of books as well.
And if people want to connect with you and find out more about your work, how do they go about doing that?
So my website would be a start. So financiallyempowered.com.au. I'm always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. So that's Grace Mugabe, CPA. And I'm also on Instagram. So financially_EMP.
Thank you so much for chatting today, Grace, and bringing your perspective and your lived experience. It has been such a valuable conversation. I have learnt so much, and I'm sure that everybody listening has as well. There is so much to take away from the conversation, and I'll certainly be reflecting on many aspects of it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate what you're doing in this space and educating people that, it really isn't just about the money.